Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us to the Life My Soul workshop, Mycoremediation as a Sustainable Strategy for the Recovery of Oil Contaminated Soils. As you can see, the session, this workshop is going to be recorded, and we will send you the link after the workshop finishes. And first of all, here you can some logistic points before starting. Again, welcome everyone. Here is the agenda for today. We are going to wait until at 10, 10 minutes after 10 to start the first presentation about the introduction of Life MySOIL project. I'm Joffre Herrero. I'm the technical coordinator of the project. I'm from Eurecat. After me, there are going to be 6 other presentations. There will be a European Union mission, a soil deal for Europe, that is going to be presented by Luis Sanchez. Then Lauren Damberger from Valgo is going to present pros and cons of conventional treatments for TPH removal. After that, Jorge Diamantino from Kepler is going to present biopile approach and limitations of TPH soil conventional remediation. And after this first block, we are going to move specifically to mycoremediation that Jaime Carrasco, a researcher from IRIAF and University of Oxford, is going to present potential of cultivated macrofungi for bioremediation. After that, Alessandro Danivale from University of Latouche is going to present experiences, considerations, and potential of mycoremediation for the contamination of TPH in soil. And finally, Caroline Zawi from Novobiom and Carlos Garcia from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid are going to present mycoremediation scale-up and circular economy, lessons learned and future steps. You will see that during the different presentations, you cannot switch on your camera or participate through the microphone. You can just write in the chat if you have any comment or question. And at the end, in the questions and answer section, we are going to, or you will be able to switch on the camera and participate. We have 2 colleagues, Ivan and Marina, that will help me in this part of the moderation and more the logistic part. And I think I said everything. So the workshop is recorded. We will send it to you, even if the people that couldn't be able to be on live in the workshop. And yeah, we encourage you to just participate in the chat and yeah, just say all your comments, all your doubts in the chat. Uh, I think I should start. Wait just one more minute until 10. I don't know. Maybe yes, I can start. So as I already said, I'm the coordinator from the Life MySOIL project. I'm Joffre Herrero from Eurecat. Uh, so Life MySOIL project is a project called A Step Further in Bioremediation, Mycoremediation for Soil Recovery. And what we are dealing in this project, so the context is that in Europe, we have around 2.5 million sites potentially contaminated. From these 2.5 millions, about 14% are expected to be contaminated and likely to require remediation. And from this 14%, there are around 35% that are polluted by total petroleum hydrocarbons. that these are TPHs and are the sum of mineral oil and polyaromatic hydrocarbons. From all the different TPHs, they have a different level of biodegradability. Being the aliphatic hydrocarbons the easier to biodegrade, and the asphaltens and resins the harder to biodegrade. From all the potential remediation strategies that we have for TPH, we just join them, and 30%, this percentage differs a lot between different countries. They are just excavated and treated in a landfill. Landfilling per se is not a remediation alternative, but we wanted to highlight because uh, the excavation and residue managing it's quite spread around Europe. Then around 50%, the TPH pollution is treated with a physicochemical treatments, for instance, thermal desorption and incineration. These kind of strategies, while they have a high removal efficiency for all type of TPH and specifically for long chain TPH, they are strategies really expensive or quite expensive, and they consume a lot of energy. While on the other hand, the conventional bioremediation is cheaper and consume less energy, but it's not efficient for long chain TPHs. And within this project, we present as alternative mycoremediation that we expect to prove that it's cheaper and consume less energy than the physicochemical treatments, and we have similarities with the conventional bioremediation, and we expect to reach similar removal efficiencies as for the physicochemical treatments. And what is mycoremediation? Mycoremediation is a fungi-based bioremediation strategy that in the TPH polluted soil, mycoremediation refers to the fungi bioaugmentation with the objective to improve the autochthonous microbiota bioremediation potential. MySOIL project consortium, it's led by EURECAT, the technological center. Then we will have, we have 3 different pilot sites that I will present in the next slide, which are one site in Italy that it's led and coordinated by Universidad de la Tuya and Eni Rewind. One site located in Spain that it's led by Kepler and Universitat Autónoma de Madrid. Another pilot site that is located in France that is led by Valgo and Novobio. And finally, we have Isodetect as an environmental consultant that gives support with the advanced monitoring tools. And just to highlight, the main objective of MySOIL project is to demonstrate the feasibility of mycoremediation technology at pilot scale for TPH removal, but by the gain of valuable insights into the conditions enabling a suitable, cost-effective, and sustainable full-scale mycoremediation treatment. As you can see in the map, there are the different spots of the pilot sites. You can see Huelva and Rouen in Spain and France. In Italy, there is the Borgo Fatti, that is the first case study that we started, and Ferrara, that it's where the full-scale pilot will be. And finally, there is Burgos, where it's going to be located the another pilot site for transferability action, where we are going to test the mycoremediation for the heat thermal fluid pollutants. And on the right, you can see the different steps of mycoremediation implementation. You can see first it's the site characterization, then the biotratability test with around 1 to 5 liter experiments, then the small pilots or mesocosm experiments that it's between 0.5 to 1 cubic meter. And finally, the pilot micropiles that are going to be tested in the field that it's 50 cubic meter. Moving on with the site characterization, here you can see the different pictures of the soil. We have from the clayey soil in Italy till the really sandy soil in Huelva, but the pollution, the total concentration of TPH is quite similar, between 5 to 6,000 ppms. But the pollution, it's quite similar from the origin. They are middle distillates, but in the case of French and Italian side, they are already strong biodegraded. While in the case of the Spanish side, it's a relative fresh contamination. So in these three different pilot sites, we already started with the implementation of mycoremediation, as you will see. First, we started with a preselection of operational parameters that these are fast tests that it's 1 to 2 weeks experiments just to choose fungal strains and bulking agents. And then from then we move to the biotratability tests that are from the microcosm experiments. And these experiments serve uh, for choosing the fungal strain and bulking agent, finding the specific or the best ratio between bulking agent and soil, and finally to characterize the critical factors for fungal growth in order to scale up this technology. Within the MySOIL project, we already moved to the mesocosm experiments. Here you can see the experiments in Spain, the Universidad Autónoma Madrid greenhouse, any Rewins reactors in Italy, and the Valgos mesocosm scheme in France. In these mesocosm experiments that are between, as I already said, half cubic meter to 1 cubic meter, we are performing, or already perform, several monitoring activities, visual verification of fungal growth, measurement of field parameters, measurement of blower flow rates, and sampling analysis of the air. And we focus more in the soil sampling with chemical analysis, microbiological approaches, and toxicity analysis. Also, in this step, ISODetect is leading the advanced monitoring tools with the MicoTrap development, which is a in situ microcosm with 13 carbon labeled compound, in which we are analyzing the metabolites, the compound specific isotope analysis, GCMS fingerprinting, and qPCR. And we want to extract the fatty acids from the microbiota and identify the key role microorganisms that are biodegrading the TPHs. Moving on, and within the next steps of the MySOIL project, on summer 2023, we are going to start the pilot mycopiles, which are they are going to be defined by the experiments of the mesocosm. And these two biopiles, they are going to be static with aeration, active aeration, and there will be each one of 50 cubic meters. One will be a mycopile with fungal inoculum formulation, and one control biopile with the same design and operation, but without any fungal inocula. And just stay tuned because we are going to organize open day for each of the pilot sites. Finally, and in order just to introduce this project, our future challenge of the LIFE20 project is to maintain a mycoremediation efficiency of 90% of TPH removal from the laboratory test till the field scale, adapt mycoremediation technology to the diversity of contaminated sites, taking into account the legal requirements of each region and country, the different climatology, lithology, and typology of and concentration of TPHs. And finally, to provide successful cases of implementation to boost the full-scale implementation, and develop general guidelines for mycoremediation technology. So this is a short resume and introduction of my soil project. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite the next speaker to present the next presentation. That is going to be Luis Sanchez, from a policy officer from the European Commission. Please, Luis, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting the Commission to give a short presentation on what the MySOIL is and how this project is very relevant for us. So thank you very much. My name is Luis Sanchez. Yes, I work in DG Agriculture and Rural Development. My first slide will be to explain shortly what the missions are, because maybe not all of you are familiar with this new concept that was introduced in the current framework program, Horizon Europe. So it's a new tool, it's a kind of experiment in a way, because the purpose is to connect better with major societal challenges and to achieve an impact in a given time frame with measurable goals. So we are trying here to be much more focused and have more impact. And 5 missions were selected. You have the 5 missions on the screen, so you can see adaptation to climate change, cancer, climate neutral and smart cities, and oceans and waters. And so you can see that they're really very important challenges. And the 5th one is Soil Deal for Europe. So this mission on soil that I will explain in the next slides. So I think for you that are, well, researching and working in this domain, there is no need to explain why soil is important and why soils are in need of our attention. The first hexagon, for example, presents a figure that probably is very familiar to you, with the estimation of 2.8 million potentially contaminated sites in Europe. We have to say here that the JRC, in a report 3 or 4 years ago, estimated that only around 70,000 have been fully remediated, and a similar number are under investigation. This reveals that this is a very big challenge, a problem that is posing a major health risk on population. But the number and diversity of identified polluted sites is increasing, has been reported also an increase in the last year. So the soil contamination, this issue, and there are more for soil, but this particular one is to some extent uncertain. There are other problems related, for example, with carbon retention. Cropland soils and peatlands are losing carbon at a very high rate per year. We have other traditional problems, particularly in the Mediterranean area, for example, unsustainable water erosion rates. We have also problems of excess of nutrients that provoke eutrophication and contamination on water and groundwater in Europe. Also problems of desertification. So at the end, it has been estimated that around 50 million per year is the cost associated to soil degradation. But as I said, this amount could be much higher when it comes to soil contamination. So no need to stress why soils are important to produce food, fresh water, or other ecosystem services. But it's important to highlight, is in red in the slide, that 60% of soils in Europe are considered unhealthy. in one way or another, these soils have problems that related to the issues I mentioned before. And this is a call for action, urgent action, that is also associated with a number of problems such as the knowledge practice divide. So there is a lot of science in soils that has been developed in the past, but there is still a gap between what is achieved by science and what is really utilized in practice. Another one that I mentioned already is soil contamination, and the main problem here is that has a very high risk associated and cost to society, and is greatly unknown compared to, for example, the level of information and knowledge we have on water or air pollution. The other problem we have is the lack of monitoring, harmonized monitoring. So absolutely no monitoring in some countries, or low level of monitoring. But in any case, this lack of harmonized, so different ways of monitoring, measuring the soil health. The good news is that political and business attention is increasingly turning to soils. And in this slide, for example, we present different strategies by the Commission under the umbrella of the Green Deal, where the soil mission has been already included, and more importantly, not the soil mission as such, but the objectives that have been put forward by the strategy, by the soil mission. So I can mention, for example, the Common Agricultural Policy and the Farm to Forest Strategy, the EU Biodiversity Strategy, the Climate Adaptation, Forest Strategy, Zero Pollution Action Plan, etc., etc. So at the end, the strategy in which the mission is embedded is built on three different blocks. One is the policy part with the EU soil strategy that was adopted back in November 21 as foreseen by the biodiversity strategy, and the soil health law that was announced to be adopted, the proposal by the Commission, in particular this year, 2023, and also all the legislation, or let's say initiatives around sustainable carbon cycles. The other one is the EU Soil Observatory. As I mentioned, monitoring and measuring is of utmost importance. And this is another important building block that is being developed and also in collaboration with the mission. And finally, the mission. The mission is the tool that is providing knowledge and also communication, networking, dissemination, and supporting the other building blocks. So the goals of the mission are, we have a main goal, which is the creation of 100 living labs. This has to do with the intention or the spirit of the mission to really have an impact, as I said, and living labs and lighthouses have been the tool to really test and transfer real solutions to practitioners and land managers. Under this umbrella, there are 8 specific objectives that relate to the challenges that I explained in the first slide. So desertification, soil organic carbon stock, soil sealing, pollution, erosion, etc. I would like to highlight here that the mission is not only about agricultural soils, even if the secretariat is managed by DG Agri and I work for DG Agri, but the mission covers all types of soils, so agriculture, forestry, natural soils, but also industrial soils, formerly mining soils, urban soils, of course. So that's the broad scope of the mission, that is structured in 4 building blocks. One is the research and innovation program. So here we want to mine the knowledge gaps that are still remaining when it comes to soils. A second one is living labs. I have another slide on living labs more specific. Harmonizing soil monitoring. I already said a word on that. And the fourth one I would like to stress now is communication, soil literacy, communication, and citizens engagement. Because one of the lessons learned in the preparation of the mission is that uh, soils are well known by scientists, by some land managers in the agricultural context, but it's not that much for the broad society. So soils are important, but not everybody is aware of that. There is, to some extent, the invisible player in many occasions. So where we are with the mission started in June 21. We work with work programs. This acronym WP stands for work program. So 3 work programs already covered, 21, 22, 23. First year was mainly focused on identifying knowledge gaps, defining roadmaps, indicators, fostering national, regional, local engagement, generation of knowledge, new soil advisors, start to approach new business models, etc. Second one, we started with more substantial research on topics like remediation strategies for contaminated sites, so very much related to what you are going to discuss today. Soil biodiversity, so probably one of the emerging topics that didn't have the deserved attention they should. The use of biowaste for soil improvement, carbon farming, of course, soil literacy, and also creating a mission knowledge repository with all the information that will stem from our projects. In 2023, the call is still open until September, and it's the first time we are going to support living labs. So we consider that the first years we paved the way for the living labs to be deployed, but also we are still working on modeling, spatial planning, horticultural practices, for example, and other topics. So living labs, probably you are familiar with that. So very briefly, is the core element of the mission. As I said, there are different definitions for living labs, but there are 3 elements that are well or are accepted generally by the research and practitioners community. One is there are real life sites, so places where people from various sectors and backgrounds get together to test solution in a co-creative manner. So we are here putting together different actors to test solutions in real environment, co-creating those solutions and finding the best solutions for different environments, different pedoclimatic conditions, land uses, etc. Lighthouses should be a continuation, and that could be also lighthouses from the onset, but the consequence of living labs where determined practice has been identified, tested, and tested as a real solution. So here we try rather to demonstrate, train, disseminate, communicate. Soil pollution and restoration, as I said, is one of the mission innovation hotspots. So there are 4. The other 3 are carbon farming, soil biodiversity, and circular economy solutions. So it's one of the main research and innovation points of attention of the mission. As I said, the scale of soil contamination remains largely unknown, and the mission supports basically solutions to avoid pollution and remediate pollution in soils, notably from pesticides, heavy metals, and microplastics, but not only. So all potential pollutants are treated or are considered in the mission. The mission is already funding a number of projects on remediation strategies. We are trying to identify different methods and financial models for decontamination, and the subsequent, if possible, reuse of land in urban and rural areas. So we are trying to define the state of play and mapping where this, how to identify and how to map these contaminated sites, trying to produce comprehensive strategies for soil restoration for land managers, with a special attention to nature-based solutions and bioremediation techniques, and also trying to identify financial and spatial planning models to promote this restoration and reuse. At the end, we would like these techniques, like the ones you are researching and testing, be also proven to work in living labs and lighthouses. So, well, this is for you, for the presentation, for your information, that also under this work program, we have two topics related to soil pollution, one on modeling and the other one on digital technologies to monitor. So this is jointly with Living Labs and other topics that you can see now in your screen. And finally, let me a second to invite you to sign the Mission Soil Manifesto that was launched on April. It's a non-legally binding document to formalize the stakeholders and citizens' participation and support to the mission. So the objective here is to declare how important soils are for us, and the intention and the commitment to protect soils and restore and remediate, in this case also pollution, but to restore and reverse the situation, the negative situation we have in Europe. It's very easy to sign, and I would like to warmly and invite you to sign the Soil Manifesto. It's also for individuals and for organizations. I think this is the end for me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to wish you a very fruitful session today.
Thank you, Luis, for your presentation, and for sure we will sign the Mission Soil Manifesto. I will invite also all the attendants. And now it's time to give floor to Lauren Tamberger, presenting pros and cons of conventional treatments for TPH removal. Lauren, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I hope you see my screen.
Yes, we can. Perfect. And also the red point.
Yeah. As a member of a remediation works company, my task is to present you the advantages and constraints of the all different techniques that was existing before the rise of mycoremediation, because we use them in my company almost every day. Why such a concern? There are some old data, but it's always the same level of repartition between all the pollutants in Europe or in France or different countries in Europe. If I made the addition of the different type of hydrocarbons, PTEX and PAH, we may see that the overall hydrocarbons pollution represents more than 1/2 of the pollutants that we may find on the different polluted sites and that we have to tackle. Because everybody is using petroleum derivatives just for the fuel, for the heating. So there is a huge production centers and a huge network of retailers till the end users. And most of you have a small tank for the car or for the heating of the house. That's why there are so numerous sites, whatever the industry, that may use TPH. TPH could be in the soil in different phases, as gas, as pure liquid, called for us LNPL, or dissolved in the groundwater, or just sticking to the solid matrix of the soil. And to face this, we developed, because of the huge impact of TPH, many techniques depending on the compartment of the soil where you may find TPH. As soil gases, you may pump them, as for the technique calls soil vapor extraction or venting. This is a physical technique to remove the pollutants. I will not say nothing about the biofilters. It's more to tackle the odors than huge quantities of TPH regarding our techniques. When TPH are liquid in the soil, you may simply pump them, pump and treat technique, or skimming technique, that is separating the water from the oil phase, and then have some technique for destruction after the pumping. So you may see in green, I want to highlight in situ techniques, and in blue more on-site techniques that you may adapt or apply just after the pumping of the pollutant. As a dissolved phase in the groundwater, there are physical techniques that are able to produce bubbles to enhance the surface of exchange between the air and the water. That's called the sparging technique. You may also inject dissolved oxidant to destroy the TPH directly in the groundwater. This in situ chemical oxidation. We are also able to enhance the natural attenuation by stimulating by biosparging, just injecting bubbles in the groundwater to enhance the diffusion of oxygen, or diluted superoxidant are also possible to enhance the oxidative level of the groundwater and slowly biodegrade the pollutant. Regarding the the part of TPH adsorbed on the solid matrix of the soil, this is mainly the major case with groundwater pollution, and about half of those cases are treated by excavation, so-called dig and dump, and most of the time put in a landfill. But this is off-site treatment, and I will focus on the on-site treatment. Physically, for light solvents or fuels, the gasoline, you may remove them by venting, but it's only available for very volatile compounds, and you may help the volatilization of heavier compounds with the thermal desorption. Soil washing is also a way to remove the hydrocarbons in the soil. I will make some focus on those techniques just after this. Chemically, there are some techniques to mix directly in the soil some oxidant in the vadose zone with a special mixers to achieve a chemical oxidation of the components not in the groundwater. And biological techniques could be applied in situ, like bioventing, or on-site as biopiles, also off-site, because in biocenters you will find several biopiles working in parallel. So I will now focus more on the adsorb phase, because that's the target of the mycoremediation. Some just illustration about what I told about bioventing. Bioventing is a very simple technique. Just dig a hole in the soil and put a pump and ventilate, or just pump to go through active carbon filter, for example. So this technique is simple. It's a mature technique used for several years, and it's the first liters that you are pumping. You are just eliminating the vapors present and then lowering the amount of pollutants. But it's only targeting very volatile compounds, like short chain for TPH. If you apply the same technique for bioventing, the same technique, but there is also always a part of biodegradation applying bioventing. You will have a bit longer chains, but the efficiency could be very long to achieve, so it lasts for several months or years. It's constrained by the soil physical properties. Permeability is one of the main characteristics of the soil that you have to check before this, and also the availability of chemicals if they are trapped in organic phase of the soil. Sometimes they are very hard to remove, even if they are supposed to be volatile. Sometimes you can't separate them because of the affinity. Thus, you may apply some heat to just physically displace equilibrium and enhance the volatilization. Everybody knows that heating accelerates the volatilization or the drying of the soil. So you may apply this thermal disruption depending on the range of temperature to longer chains, several cycles, pH, for example. It's very faster. Usually we stay for between 4 and 6 months to achieve such a technique on site. The efficiency could be very good. You calculate it, and because the law of energy are very strict, you may obtain the results that was expected. More than 95%, for example, removal is very often. There are a lot of type of applications. There are some in the pictures at the top is in situ thermal disruption, or in the bottom pictures is in pile on-site thermal disruption. So different possibility of the energy. Also, you may use fuel, gas, electricity, vapors, or something like that. Constraints are that if in fact, because of the cost of energy, it could be expensive. Energy consumption also produce greenhouse gases. That it is another environmental problem. And at the end, the soil is almost dead, very dry, cooked, or sometimes burned, and it's not proper to reintroduce life directly in this soil. I told you about soil washing. On the picture on the left, you see the effect of a one-step washing, removing all the oil surrounding the grain of sands. This was a lab experiment, but we achieved about the same results in this type of on-site machinery. Cycloning. In separating the sand, you produce a product that you may valorize from the soil. There are different type of mechanism as specific surface, affinity with the clays, that are all converging to concentrate the pollutant in the finest part of the soil. Fine particles and clays are concentrating TPH and also metals in the same time. So same technique is available for mixed pollution. But if the clay plays a role, it's also a limitation. If you have more than 20 or 30% of clays, this technique is not applicable. This is relatively slow. You only treat some tons or dozens of tons per hour. So you have to stay a long time on a site to remove the pollution from a huge quantity of soil. And it's quite expensive because you produce a lot of polluted, concentrated waste that you have to eliminate. And if you go to a destruction center or a landfill, you have to implement this cost in the total operation. I told you about the mixing of oxidants. This technique is quite available in all the regions because it's coming from the geotechnical treatment of soil to harden the soil before to build houses or different buildings. They used to inject some cement or lime in the soil, and we just take the same technique to mix oxidant or reductant or stabilizer. There is no excavation, so you are able to lower the carbon emission. Your intervention on site is very fast, even if it works for months after your campaign. The occupation of the site is quite short. But when contaminants are mixed, it's very hard to find the right formulation that is able to treat different type of pollution in the same soil. For stabilization, for example, it's hard to demonstrate that it will last for decades in the soil. Application is also sensitive to weather. It has big rain. Sometimes it's changing the mixture and the possibility to apply it on site. You may produce some gases by the reaction of your reagent, for example, oxidant and TPH, and in doing this, you need to work under a tent and change the cost of the works. And there are a lot of constraints. You see that it's better when the soil is just empty, with no building, no pipes in the soils. And also the presence of big boulders may block the odor to perform the mixing. Biological treatment could be applied. I know that Georgia will make a focus just after me. Could be very artisanal way or more industrial. This is in the US because we are not making some money consumption biopiles in France. Biopiles are a type of solid bioreactors when you are able to manage the moisture, the nutrient contents, the entrance, the size. It's a quite green technique, relatively cheap, simple to implement because you may consider that it naturally occurs in the soil and you have just to enhance the natural reaction. The environmental footprint is reputed to be good, and after this bioremediation, the soil is respecting biodiversity, and you may restart a life or culture on this soil. More major constraints are the fact that biotreatment are usually very long, months or years. It's low efficiency upon several pH or heavy molecule long change TPH. It's sensitive to weather. For example, when it's freezing, it's very hard to start a biopipe, or you're already running biopipe could just stop biodegradation. And one of the major limits is the bioavailability of the components that you want to degrade. Even if the molecules are supposed to be degradable, they just could stop if the bioavailability is not there. So if I compare two different techniques, biodegradation as a very green technique, very respective of the biodiversity, for example, to thermal disruption, that is one of the most efficient today technique to remove the TPH. You see that the advantages and constraints are just complementary, and we hope that mycoremediation could attack all of the different advantages on this list, and that our project MySOIL could demonstrate some lacking information. For example, how far we are able to go in the residual concentration, how low we may go, which type of molecule we are able to destroy, higher weight molecule, and Geoffrey also said application to heat fluid. So it's a diversity of possibilities that we have to demonstrate just to make an acceptation of this new technique as a tool for us, Remediation Works company. Thank you for your attention, and have a good morning.
Thank you, Laurent, for your presentation. And I think we can move to the next presentation, that it's Jorge. Please, the floor is yours. Wait a moment. Charging. Yeah, perfect.
Hello, everybody. I just want to start by thanking you for assisting in this webinar organized by LIFE20 ENV. And I'll start presenting my company, Kepler Ingeniería y Ecogestión. Is an engineering company dedicated to environment. We perform inspection of contaminated soils and associated groundwater, and to check for contaminations, and then we can also perform the remediation of these sites. We use several techniques, and one of the most used is the bioremediation. And then we also act in emergencies when accidental spills of hazardous products occurs. We act to stop the spread of the contamination, and then we can remediate the sites affected. Another line of our company is the biogas. We design and build biogas plants. We are working in this sector because biogas is a very important technology in the energy transition towards a real economy. And then at last, we have our own biotechnological lab where we perform microbiological analysis to check the microbial activity, and we also use molecular biology tools to identify and characterize the microorganisms, the microorganisms and the microbial communities. Another access that we do is the viability tests in soil, water, or sludge, where we check for limitations or inhibitions. As we saw in the last presentation, bioremediation is a biological treatment, is a process in which the contaminants are eliminated by microorganisms. It is a green and very cheap technique, but it has some limitations. For example, the pollutant needs to be accessible, bioavailable to the microorganisms, and that can occur some inhibitions like the toxicity if the contaminant is present in very high concentrations, or the contaminants can also be very complex and not biodegradable. So before you perform a bioremediation treatment, you have to do viability assay in lab to check inhibitions and select the most effective treatment strategy. You have two main approaches, two main strategies. You can do biostimulation, where you add nutrients, water, to stimulate the microbial, to stimulate the activity of the microorganisms already present in the matrix, in the soil or in the water. Or you can do bioaugmentation, where you add an inoculum. At Kepler, we do the identification and extraction of the microorganisms present in the matrix, soil or water. Then we incubate these microorganisms in the lab and adapt them to an increasing concentration of the pollutant. Then we scale up this bacterial consortium until we get a volume to be applied in the field. So biopiles are the most used technique to treat soils. It's an ex situ treatment. So when a oil spill occurs, the first you have to do is to stop the spread of the contamination, and then you have to excavate the affected area. Then you have to put this soil above a previous installed geomembrane to avoid the contamination of the natural soil. Then you distribute the soil to and give a shape that you previously designed. Then what we do at the start and during the operation of the biopiles is to apply nutrients and the inoculum, the bacterial inoculum that is adapted to the contaminant. Then you have to mix the soil using a backhoe, and the mix of the soil is mainly to oxygenate it, because bioremediation processes are mainly aerobic. Finally, you have to cover up the biopiles with a membrane to protect them from weather conditions like wind and rain. During the operation of the biopiles, you have to monitor several factors, several parameters, like pH, nutrients, or the humidity of the soil, because all these parameters affect the main parameter, that is the microbiological activity that you can also control and evaluate. Now I'll present a case that a project that we worked in Kepler. It was a challenging case because the soil was contaminated with mineral oils like lubricants and motor oil. These pollutants consisted mainly of heavy chains, both aliphatic and aromatic heavy chains, and they are very complex and hard to eliminate. At the beginning, we had concentrations around 50,000 milligrams per kilo. So we decided to build a biopilot to test if we were able to eliminate these contaminants through conventional bioremediation. For that, we built a biopile with 22 tons of contaminated soil, and as I said before, we extracted the microorganisms from this soil and produced a bacterial consortium adapted to the mineral oil. During the operation of the biopile, we added this inoculum more or less in a monthly basis, and the biopile was in operation for 1.5 years. Regarding the results, at the beginning, we saw a degradation, a decrease in TPH concentrations until more or less 5,000–6,000 milligrams per kilo of TPH. And TPH elimination around 50–60%. Then it seemed it was decreasing, but in the following months we saw that the process, the biodegradation, stalled at around 50,000 milligrams per kilo. So the bacteria couldn't go further in the elimination of the pollutants. When we check for the degradation by the range of TPH chains, we saw that the light chains were almost fully eliminated, and what remained was the heavy chains, the more complex ones. This is a perfect case where microremediation could be a solution for a biological treatment of this soil. because the fungi might help in the degradation of these heavy chains. At the end, although we couldn't fully decontaminate the soil, however, we were able to change the category of the soil from a hazardous to a non-hazardous waste category, which means that the management was much cheaper, generating savings for the client. In conclusion, the motor oils found in the soil were not very bioavailable and presented a non-biodegradable fraction. Although we produced an inoculum adapted to these contaminants, the biopad entered a stationary state, and in the end, we were able to change the category, as I said, to the category of the waste to non-hazardous, generating economic savings. Well, thank you and for your attention, and we can continue.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge, for your nice presentation and to introduce also at the end the topic of mycoremediation and it's also nice always to find real results in the field. So we will jump to the next presentation that it's the one from Alessandro D'Annibale from the University of De La Tuscia that is going to present experiences, consideration, and potential of mycoremediation for the contamination of TPH in soil. Please, Alessandro, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
We can see the screen.
Yes, I'm going to
the full screen.
Share.
Okay. One moment. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay, good morning to everybody. One of the main technical constraints to in situ remediation of hydrocarbon impacted soils is the presence of a fine-grained texture which negatively affects intrinsic soil's permeability and thus the rate at which oxygen is provided to degrading organisms. In such scenarios, ex situ techniques requiring the excavation of the contaminated soil are frequently adopted and often combined with the application of soil amendments such as lignocellulosic residues to improve soil porosity. We faced this case as we were recruited by ICOM Italy to perform biotreatability tests at lab scale on a historically contaminated soil with aliphatic hydrocarbons collected nearby an oil refinery site owned by Eni and located in Gela, where the predominance of the clay fraction precluded a successful application of in situ treatments. Our specific task was to evaluate the degradation and detoxification performance of a variety of treatments of microaugmentation, an ex situ technique relying on the use of fungal inoculants. The rationale for using filamentous fungi in the bioremediation of matrices contaminated with persistent hydrophobic pollutants relies on several peculiarities that characterize these organisms. First of all, the apical growth mode, a high propensity to generate highly branched structures, and a high turgor pressure at the hyphal apex allow fungi to reach soil regions inaccessible to bacteria and to penetrate inside the soil aggregates. At the same time, fungi are able to modulate their adhesion to hydrophobic surfaces via the production of small molecular weight amphiphilic proteins termed hydrophobins, thus coming into close contact with the pollutants. Their filamentous growth mode gives rise to the formation of mycelial networks that connect either as highways through which bacteria can rapidly translocate, thus acting as a very efficient dispersal vector of bacteria, or alternatively as pipelines taking up and actively transferring pollutants through their hyphal structures and via cytoplasmic streaming aided by lipid rich vesicles. Moreover, several fungi belonging to the phyla Ascomycota and above all to Basidiomycota are able to produce low substrate specificity enzymes acting on pollutants and operating in the extracellular environment through radical-based reactions. Besides copper oxidases and ligninolytic peroxidases able to bring about the monoelectronic oxidation of a variety of aromatic pollutants, an ever-increasing number of fungi is recognized to produce extracellular unspecific peroxygenases able to bring about the hydrogen peroxide dependent hydroxylation of linear, branched, and even cycloalkanes, thus complementing the action of cytochrome P450 monoxygenases, which are, however, intracellular enzymes and thus require contaminant uptake. Moreover, fungi often exhibit a wider tolerance to pH and moisture conditions than bacteria, and several fungal species are known to be active producers of biosurfactants, amphiphilic compounds, or polymeric compounds capable of mobilizing and pseudo-solubilizing under certain conditions adsorbed pollutants. After this brief digression and returning to the treatment of that previously mentioned clay soil contaminated with aliphatic hydrocarbons, we decided to use two approaches. The first one involving the choice of alloctonous fungal strains with proven hydrocarbonoclastic capacity and subsequent application of their inocula to the metrics of concern. The second instead involved the recovery, screening, and taxonomic identification of indigenous fungal isolates and the subsequent production of their inocula due to the ever-increasing recognition that microbial inoculants based on indigenous microorganisms might be frequently superior to those composed of alloctonous ones. Regardless of the microbes type, the soil was air dried, 2 mm seed, and before microcosm preparation, its moisture content adjusted to 50% of its water holding capacity. The selected lignocellulosic amendment was a mixture of wheat straw, poplar wood chips, and upstream of its mixing with the soil, underwent moisture adjustment to 65% and subsequent sterilization in autoclave. For the preparation of solid phase fungal inocula, autoclave sterilized millet seeds were used as the inoculum carrier. The experimental design included two types of non-inoculated incubation controls, one of which made of non-amended soil, and the other one made of soil mixed with the lignocellulosic amendment in a 5:1 mass ratio. The latter control was necessary since in mycoremediation, both the survival of the inoculum and its subsequent colonization of the contaminated soil generally requires the presence of lignocellulosic amendment. The remaining microcosms conducted on the soil amendment mixture prepared as above were inoculated with monospecific inoculants or with a binary consortium. In soil microcosms, the quantification of ergosterol, a specific component of fungal membranes, was used to infer indirectly fungal growth, as shown in plot C. Non-amended incubation control showed a negligible ergosterol content, which did not change over time. Conversely, at the first harvest, a high stimulatory effect on fungal growth was found in all the microcosms that had been amended with the lignocellulose mixture, and the concentration of this parameter increased further in the amended incubation control and in microcosms inoculated with Pseudo-Allescheria and the binary consortium of Plerodus ostreatus with Botryosphaeria rhodina. In all the macrocosms amended with the sterile lignocellulose mixture, including the amended incubation control, densities of the heterotrophic cultivar bacteria increased by more than 3 orders of magnitude after 30 days incubation, that's the first harvest, and in the Plerodus ostreatus, and the Plerodus ostreatus inoculated microcosm, and in the BC microcosm, they were even higher at the subsequent harvest. Density of specialized bacteria were also promoted by the addition of the lignocellulose mixture, with the highest values being observed in 30-day-old ice microcosms. Due to the known limitations of cultivation-dependent approaches, Illumina meta-barcoding of bacterial and fungal RNA genes was used to describe the composition of the soil microbial community at start and in 60-day-old remediation microcosms. The major phyla in the soil start and its related non-amended incubation controls were actinobacteria and firmicutes, and above all, proteobacteria, whose constituent classes are shown in the upper plot. Other phyla, such as Planktomycetes, Acidobacteria, and Chloroflexi, reported to be abundant in long-term crude oil contaminated soils, were present at low levels and thus were included in the artificial group others. Within the phylum Proteobacteria, the most abundant genera in the classes of gamma and beta proteobacteria were Pseudomonas and Cupreavidus, respectively. Bacillus and Penibacillus instead were the most abundant genera within the phylum Firmicutes. The most significant impact on community structure was observed upon the addition of the lignocellulose mixture. Its presence exerted an opposite effect on the diversity of the bacterial and fungal biota, which was promoted in the former case and reduced in the latter. The bacterial community structure in the amended incubation control markedly differ from the other microcosms, with the relative abundances of actinobacteria and proteobacteria being respectively the highest and the lowest as compared to the other microcosms. In mycoremediation microcosms, lower relative abundances of gram-positive taxa than the amended incubation control were observed. This effect being evident for actinobacteria in the Plerodus ostreatus augmented microcosms and for firmicutes in those inoculated with Botryosphaeria rhodina. In the same microcosms, the relative abundances of beta and gamma proteobacteria were significantly modified, albeit in opposite directions. The fungal community instead, in pristine soil and non-amended incubation control, was dominated by Ixobasidiales, since the Basidiomycetus East Meira was the predominant ribotype in these matrices. Other fungi showing high relative abundance were ubiquitous, saprotrophic molds, often associated with oil-contaminated soils and belonging to the orders of Pleosporales, Eurociales, and Capnodiales, such as, for instance, Alternaria, Penicillium, and Cladosporium, respectively. The amended incubation control instead was strikingly dominated by Mucorales, which was nearly absent in all the other amended microbes, and to a lesser extent by Eurociales and Hypocreales. Botulosphaeria rudina, when augmented alone or in combination with Pleurodus ostreatus, was strongly outcompeted by the soil microbiota, reaching around 6 and 1% relative abundances respectively. The Agaricalis order instead was the predominant order in Pleurodus ostreatus and binary consortium augmented microcosm, and genus level analysis established that the detected Agaricalis sequences were mainly represented by Pleurodus ostreatus, confirming the ability of this genus to compete with the autochthonous microbiota. This table shows the residual concentration of aliphatic hydrocarbons in the two non-inoculated incubation controls and the micro-augmented microcosm, as well as the non-bioavailable fraction determined as start through sequential supercritical extraction with carbon dioxide under mild conditions. In the non-amended incubation control, no significant changes in hydrocarbon concentration were observed along the incubation. Conversely, in the amended incubation control, concentration of aliphatics dropped by around 75% after 30-day incubation, while the residual concentration at the subsequent harvest, namely after 60 days incubation, did not significantly differ from the previous one. A time-dependent decline in contaminant concentration instead was observed throughout the whole incubation period in the micro-augmented microcosm, and the best results were observed in 60-day-old microcosm inoculated with Pleurodus ostreatus and its binary consortium with Botulosphaeria rudina. Noteworthy, the residual pollutant concentrations found in 60-day-old micro-augmented microcosm were significantly lower than their respective non-bioavailable fractions determined at start. We also assessed the possible detoxification of the soil, and to do that, we used two acute contact tests, one of which based on the mortality of subadults of the springtail Folsomia candida, a very widespread and common soil arthropod, and the other one relying on the determination of germination and radical elongation of the highly sensitive plant Lepidium sativum, commonly known with the name watercress. The soil turned out to be highly toxic towards Folsomia candida. In fact, an average mortality of around 87% was observed in all the microcosm at start. In the non-amended incubation control, no toxicity did not decrease over time. By contrast, a high extent of detoxification was found in the amended incubation controls and micro-augmented microcosm, where significant drops in mortality were observed. The contaminated soil also exerted a high phytotoxicity towards Lepidium sativum. In fact, in 60-day-old non-amended incubation control, percent inhibition of germinability and radical elongation amounted to 71 and 76% respectively as compared to the still water control. Both parameters increased in the remaining coeval microcosm, including the amended incubation control, even though only a partial detoxification was evident. To provide an integrative index, seed germination and root elongation were combined into an index of germination, the values of which indicated a 6- and 7-fold increase in Pseudo-Alescheria and Plerus ostreatus microcosmos. To conclude, then the expectation that the site-specific bioaugmentation approach relying on an indigenous isolate that in this case was represented by Pseudo-Alescheria, the expectation that this approach might give best results was betrayed. We invested on Pseudo-Alescheria isolate that failed to produce significantly better results than those achieved with the amended incubation control, with exceptions of Plerus striatus and its primary consortium of Podriosphaeria rhodina. The biostimulatory effect due to the lignocellulosic amendment, acting both as a bulking agent and as a slow release nutrient, resulted in similar performance to those of mycoremediation. The reduction in the hydrocarbon load was also associated with a partial soil detoxification as assessed by 2 contact tests. So thank you for your attention, and I show also the headings to papers that we published on these metrics, just to acknowledge the relevant contribution that we had from both Italian colleagues and foreign colleagues from other institutions.
Thank you so much, Alessandro, for your presentation.
Okay.
We'll try to move to Jaime again.
Okay. Is it working now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Perfect.
now it's working now. All right, correct. All right. Right. Okay. So thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation to participate in this workshop, particularly to Professor Enrique Aymar, who is leading the team in the University Autónoma of Madrid. Unfortunately, I'm having technical problems, but here is my picture, so you are not missing much with the mushrooms. So my name is Jaime. I'm a researcher in the science of cultivated mushrooms at the IRIAF. Is a public research center based in the region of Castilla-La Mancha. That is the most productive region of cultivated mushrooms in Spain. And today I am presenting an approach to the potential of cultivated mushrooms for bioremediation in line with this project, Like MySOIL, where I am collaborating as external advisor. So in this slide, I present a summary of the presentation, where I will introduce the cultivation of microfungi in line with the circular economy approach. The complex metabolisms of these organisms resumed by an army of enzymes, and how the mushroom microbiome evolves throughout the process of cultivation, and for sure the potential for mycoremediation among cultivated fungi. So mushrooms are heterotrophic organisms that require selective substrate for its growth. Those substrates are based on waste and byproducts from the agriculture and forestry, such as with the straw, chicken manure, or sawdust from hardwood. The cultivation is performed indoors under controlled conditions of mild temperature and high relative humidity that must change during the different stages of cultivation. Commercial cultivation integrates different operations that must be coordinated, including the production of the seed of this microfungi that we call the spawn, the substrates, the cultivation by the growers, and also the distribution of the product in post-harvest. Those different operations are commonly located in low populated rural areas in the different producing countries in Europe, and this industry contributes to fixed population and to the development of the local economy. By the end of the crop cycle, the industry is generating large volumes of waste, so-called spent mushroom substrate. Per ton of mushroom produce, we are generating 3.3 tons of spent mushroom problem. So the management of this waste is a real headache for the growers and the industry itself. So the cultivation of macrofungi is by itself, by definition, a good example of a circular economy while employing residues and waste, as I already noted from the agriculture and forestry, to produce fungal protein. So the content of protein in macrofungi is similar to the content of protein in meat, eggs, or milk. They also contain multiple bioactive compounds and micronutrients with nutritional interest. And they also, adding to this, they present a low caloric value and a huge satiating effect, so preventing as well obesity. And finally, the waste generated by the industry, this spent mushroom compost, can be recycled and reused for multiple purposes, including, for sure, bioremediation. So macrofungi have a very powerful enzymatic machinery that can digest complex polymers such as cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignins that are present in soil or substrates. Enzymes such as silanase and cellulase breaks the cellulose and hemicellulose. For instance, in the case of the substrate used for Agaricus bisporus cultivation, which is the most commonly cultivated species in Europe. Then afterwards, other enzymes, including the peroxidases and lacases, breaks the lignin that is contained in the secondary wall of this wheat straw. So we have reported that by the end of the cycle, lignin cellulose or hemicellulose are degraded by almost 50%. In some other authors reported that almost 20% of carbohydrates in total are expected to be degraded in the spent compost when compared to the compost at filling in the beginning of the crop cycle. So the substrate inoculated by the mycelium are not sterile, and the microbiome surrounding this environmental niche, this substrate where the mushrooms developed, the process of cultivation evolves and changes due to different interactions between the environmental niche and the native microbiota, and also the host mycelium. For instance, microbiota has a role during composting. In here, I'm showing as an example of mushroom cultivation the case of Agaricus bisporus. So phase 1 and phase 2 are the two composting process to produce a selective substrate, and in phase 3 we already have the presence of the mycelium itself. So once the mycelium is in the compost, there are certain interactions in between the microbiota living in this niche and the host. So for instance, some bacterial lignocellulosic activity is breaking down the fibers, releasing nutrients ready to be absorbed by the host. Some secondary metabolites present in the media and secreted, but this native microbiota can be absorbed by the hyphae. There are also biofilms that protect the hyphae, for example, they protect them by of the actions of pollutants and can stimulate the growth of the hyphae. There's also some bacteriolytic activity, so the mushrooms itself, when growing as substrate, can digest partially part of the microbiota and use them as a source of carbon. And so here in the right, you can see basically the vertical structure of a crop. So here is the substrate, and this is for Agaricus bisporus. And here there is another material we call casing. And in the casing, there are also interactions in between the host and the native microbiota. So, for example, the native microbiota is consuming volatile organic compounds, driving the fructification, so the transition from the vegetative tissue till the reproductive tissue. So basically, in this plot on the left, what I'm showing is the different stages of cultivation. This phase 1, which is the first stage of composting. This phase 2, which is the stage for sterilization, pasteurization of the compost. And in here, in this point, we are inoculating the compost. So in this S3, in this point, we already have the mycelium inoculating and the mycelium growing. So basically, what we can see in here is that the alpha and beta diversity for bacteria, as stated by next generation sequencing using metataxonomic approach, this is the alpha diversity and this is the beta diversity. These plots are showing just the diversity of the bacteria in this substrate, because NGS provides like a qualitative picture of what is going on in this substrate. And in here we can see the fungal diversity, the alpha diversity and the beta diversity. So what we can see is that the colonization of the plot decreases drastically the alpha diversity of bacteria, and as well the alpha diversity of the fungi. So basically, the macrofungi is substituting or consuming somehow or competing somehow with the native microbiota. Then afterwards, the bacterial microbiota jump. And this is because they are using part of the material secreted by the mycelium. So basically, the action of the microfungi in the substrate changes the equilibrium. And using the phospholipid fatty acid content, the characterization of these markers, we can just have a picture of the living microbiota. And in here we can see also that the living bacterial microbiota is dropping after the colonization of the casing, while the fungal living microbiota is increasing basically by the action. So there is a negative correlation, for example, in between the fungi and for example, gram-positive bacteria that are present in uncolonized compost. So in summary, there is a big action and a big impact of this macrofungi when colonizing a substrate. And regarding the action of this macrofungi and for mycoremediation, or the activity for mycoremediation, in short, we noted that the enzymatic activity and the change in the microbiome substrate colonized are proved to be efficient to degrade different pollutants in contaminated soils, such as polycyclic aromatic carbons, due to, for instance, to the action of the ligninolytic enzymes or cytochrome P450. Also, the degradation of heavy metals and antibiotics, for instance, by versatile peroxidases or lacases, as well pharmaceuticals that can contaminate soils or grounds. And the strategies driven this mycoremediation have been already reported and noted previously by other presenters. But what we are doing is just to biostimulate indigenous microorganisms while adding these macrofungi into the contaminated soil, because part of the secondary metabolites secreted extracellularly and also the antibiotic activity towards some of the competitors in this environmental niche promote the growth of other microbiota. We can also augment the content of microorganisms that have metabolic profiles to degrade pollutants that are present in contaminated soils. And obviously, these metabolic interactions between bacteria provide like a microbial consortium that can work all together. So, for example, in this picture, you can see that the spent mushroom substrate can be introduced in a bioreactor, and obviously we have different tools, chromatographic tools and other tools that have been already reported just to measure the degradation of these pollutants. So in summary, just to conclude, cultivated mushrooms act as primary or secondary decomposers of complex polymers. The difference in between primary decomposers is that they can't decompose substrate that are based, for instance, in sawdust, and that they are sterile and they don't need the actions of primary decomposers. In the case of secondary decomposers, like it is the case of Agaricus bisporus, the regular button mushrooms, they require the actions of previous microorganisms to destroy the matrix and somehow access the nutrients that are in this material. So the powerful enzymatic machinery of primary decomposers are likely more efficient for mycoremediation, like in the case of Pleurotus ostreatus, the oyster mushroom. The microbiome of a substrate colonized by macrofungi changes throughout the process of mycelium germination. So there are events of competition, biostimulation and bioaugmentation occurring in this environmental niche. Spent mushroom compost is a low-value waste continuously generated by the local mushroom industry with significant content on active vegetative mycelium, and this is available for bioremediation. We are producing almost 1 million tons of cultivated mushrooms in Europe, so we are producing yearly almost 3.3 million of spent mushroom compost that is available for this technique. So there are obviously some limitations such as the nutrient availability and of course hydric stress that can limit the scaling up of mycoremediation in the field, because as I already noted, we are growing this crop under controlled environment. So we really require research such as the one conducted in MySOIL to design the correct microcosms. So thank you so much. Here I am again with the mushrooms, and sorry for the problems that I have in this presentation and with the camera.
Thank you, Jaime. At the end, it worked.
Yeah, sorry for that. Thank you.
That's okay. Before going to the last presentation, I would like to invite to all the attendants to write your own questions. There is already one question in the chat, but if you are willing, it will ease us to solve these questions after the next presentation. So the next presentation, it's titled Mycoremediation Scale-Up and Circular Economy, Lessons Learned and Future Steps. And it's going to be presented by Caroline Zawi from Novobiom and Carlos García Delgado from Universitat Autónoma de Madrid. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so hello everyone. As Geoffrey said, this last part of the webinar is going to be presented by both Carlos and I. So I'm Caroline Zawi. I'm the scientific director at Novo Biome, and I leave the floor to Carlos to present himself.
Yeah, I'm Carlos Garcia, a professor from the Universidad Autónoma of Madrid.
Okay. So can I take the control of the presentation or? Yes.
No, I can.
Okay.
I
Okay,
prefer.
perfect. Yeah, so in this last part, the aim of our talk is to wrap up a bit what we've been doing, what we've learned so far. And in a way, this leads us back to what Laurent was saying at the beginning of the webinar about mycoremediation and how to use it for soil remediation, dealing with TPH contaminations. Indeed, there are many points that this technique needs to show in order to become a common technique. And this is what we are addressing at the moment. So indeed, although there are a lot of information linked to the use of fungi to treat contaminated soil, contaminated with TPH, there are a lot of proof of concepts. There has been some pilots going on, but yet the technology has not been deployed at an industrial scale. And therefore, the reason of our project, the MySOIL project, which has for main objectives to validate the implementation of such techniques, because while it's important to show that fungi can have an impact, it's even more important to show that it works at full scales, that it's compatible with remediation works, logistics and equipment, and all the full scales constraints, let's say. But also because we are talking about using fungi to make sure that we have the capacity to either stimulate the soil or produce the fungal enrichments that are necessary to treat the soil in such large quantities. So to go back on the project, where are we at the moment? So yeah, the logics of the project has been shown already. It's a stepwise process where for each of the sites, investigation has been performed to characterize the soil. Biotreatability tests have been performed at bench scales in our respective labs. And at the moment, we are in between the two last scales validation of the project, which are tests in mesocosms on a few cubic meters of soil, testing different conditions. And shortly this summer, we'll be moving on to the full-size demonstrator on site. And indeed, why are we spending that much time for these two steps? Is to be able to validate that we have the means to use it at large scale, that the way we handle this technique is compatible with the logistics and the works constraints for the soil remediation sector. And this is really important for this technology to be taken up by the remediation actors. And therefore, and this is just a few examples, those two steps, the meso and demo scale steps, are addressing important points such as how do we do with our fungal enrichment in case of bioaugmentation? How do we condition this enrichment prior to sending it to the site for treating the soil, and etc. And so this is to highlight a bit further my last point. Indeed, we are doing a sort of soil bioremediation using fungi, but dealing with fungi necessitates to look at specific prerequisite points to dealing with fungi, such as specific soil moisture conditions, aeration of the soil, availability of nutrients, control of temperatures. And okay, these are the things we already look at bench scale, but this will have to be fitted into what can be handled on site for soil treatment. And of course, what is sought after is engineering a system that is also compatible with what is used commonly on the field with classical bioremediation works. How do we do to secure the fungal tools to perform a mycoremediation? So within our consortium, we are pursuing two main approaches. The first one is the use of spent mushroom substrates, and we heard already about it thanks to Jaime in the previous presentation. We also work by producing specific strain enrichment, a solid on solid medium. So the first approach is used by University Autonomous of Madrid, which Carlos will present together with Kepler. The Italian colleagues are pursuing both approach, while us at Novobiome and together with Valgo, we are investigating the second option. And so basically, in order to address this point, what can we learn and what can we exploit from the edible mushroom industry? And so I leave the floor to Carlos.
Two of the most important inputs for the fungal biopiles are the bulking agents and the inoculum media. We have to assure a good oxygenation of the biopile. We have to work in aerobic conditions, and we need a good inoculum to assure strong colonization of the soil by the fungi. So we can extract some lessons from the nature and the mushroom industry to these aims. For instance, fungi play a major role as the composer and the recycles of organic matter. So we can mimic the habitat of fungi to favor the fungal colonization. And we can do this with the knowledge of the mushroom industry, using, for instance, selective or specific media for each fungus, and recycle or reuse local organic waste. Here we can see some of these organic waste that are used in the mushroom industry to produce substrate. But I'm not sure that they are waste really, because these are the raw materials of the mushroom industry and the food of the fungi. The most common materials are cereal straw, corn, pruning waste, manure, or compost produced with different lignocellulosic materials and manure. And after the culture of the mushroom, the substrate is the spent mushroom substrate that can be used as ingredient of new mushroom substrate or different use, as Jaime showed us previously. But we can use this spent mushroom substrate in bioremediation as inoculum media and bulking agent at the same time. Yes. Sorry, because here. In this slide, we can see the two most common mushroom cultivated, Agaricus bisporus and Pleurotus striatus, and the aspect of the spent mushroom substrate or the substrate of this mushroom. The compost, the substrate of Agaricus bisporus is produced by a composted of wet straw and manure, because Agaricus is a secondary decomposer. But in contrast, Pleurotus is a primary decomposer and demands lignocellulosic materials. In this example, it's only wet straw. So the lesson is that we have to look for a specific substrate or inocula for each fungi. Another important point is that the spent mushroom substrates are alive. The mycelium of the fungi is alive and is useful as inoculum for the macropyle, and at the same time, the spent mushroom substrate works as bulking agent and nutrient source. So, are spent mushroom substrate waste or raw materials? Because these organic materials have interesting and useful properties for mycoremediation. They are bulking agents and improve the water retention capacity of the soil, are rich in nutrients and a good source of organic carbon for the mycelium. Contains viable mycelium, useful for as inoculant for the biopiles, and to contain abundant microbiota that can enhance the microbial population of the soil and can collaborate in the soil remediation process. And finally, and this is a really important point, this subproduct is very abundant, easy to obtain, and cheap. So the mushroom industry is a clear example of circular economy. I think that is a paradigm of circular economy. And specifically, the use of spent mushroom substrate in mycoremediation convert this subproduct or this waste in a biosource. In this slide, you can see the aspect of different biotratability tests in different soil. For instance, this is a biotratability test of a soil polluted with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and lead, treated with spent mushroom compost of Agaricus bisporus. And these other images are the current experiment designs that we are running in the Autonomous University of Madrid in this project. This is the soil from Huelva, polluted with total petroleum hydrocarbons. In this case, treated with spent mushroom substrate. Here you can see the upper layer of the spent mushroom substrate of Agaricus bisporus. And here you can see the aspect of the soil and the upper layer of the spent mushroom substrate of Pleurotus ostreatus. Caroline?
Okay, thank you. And so, yes, for the second approach, when it comes to bio-augmenting the soil with a specific strain tailored to the contaminant and also the soil to be treated, then there is the challenge of producing this fungal enrichment. So indeed, these are techniques that we can do in the lab, produce a few kilograms in the lab, but how do we go from a few kilograms to, let's say, 100 tons a week of fungal enrichment that can be used routinely for full-scale soil remediation projects? This is not the same order of magnitude at all. And so for us at Novobiome, it's really focusing on how to master the knowledge of the different strains we work with to develop different applications, not only knowing them, but also knowing how to grow them in ways that are compatible with the application we are developing in a cost-effective way as well. And so basically, and we've seen it already, we have some hints from the previous presentation, the edible mushroom industry is the one that masters this kind of production at that scale of magnitude. And so we know that this industry can produce specific production for the fungi we consume, which later on produces the spent mushroom compost, which we've seen. But we could also use this entire process in order to produce the strains that we specifically selected for soil mycoremediation. And you see here in pictures the different steps for preparing a substrate, a fungal substrate, until it is ready to be inoculated, and then colonization occurs, and this is then conditioned in a specific way in order to allow for fructification. And what we do is that we exploit that system, but we don't go, of course, till the fructification step. But this allows us to have bulk amounts of fungal inocula ready to be used for soil mycoremediation. And so this is part of what we've been doing. I'm trying to change the slide if someone can. Yes, thanks. What a part of the work that we've been doing within the project is also securing the upscaling of our fungal enrichment in order to match the amount to test at the demo scale. So you see here we've been partnering with an infrastructure, specific infrastructure in the Flemish regions of Belgium, which allowed us to test and run several trials with our specifically designed substrate for the strain we aim to use for the demonstrator within the LIFE MySOIL project. So you see here on the left the end result of the composting of our specific recipe for fungal enrichment, which is ready to be spawned. So basically inoculated with grains inoculated with our fungi. And here I think hopefully I cannot activate the video, but the picture on the right is actually a video. It's very short, but you see the process of how to fill in a tunnel, and prior to that, inoculating it with the grain spawns, mixing, and to the tunnel where all the conditions necessary for fungal growth, substrate colonization will be met. So with specific moist control of temperature, availability of oxygen, and so on. So really, there are both opportunities and some challenges when it comes to securing a fungal enrichment for soil mycoremediation. So first of all, the good point is that when you go for bioaugmentation to treat your soil, is that if you work with Basidiomycota mushrooms or fungi, you can rather easily design your substrate and subcontract the production to existing substrate producers. And this is what we are working on at the moment for this approach. And of course, this approach is really feasible when you work with strains that thrives on substrate that mimic formulations that people use for the edible mushroom industry. So either the straw-like substrates or the more agaricus-like substrates. These are things that are really well mastered by the industry. And yeah, the point is to be able to design substrates that resembles those so that it fits easily into those production lines. However, there are still some limitation when one wants to use Ascomycota, which are also somehow champions for soil mycoremediation. These ones will not be produced this way for sure in such infrastructures because they are considered the bad guys. They're a risk for contaminating the whole facility and ruining the whole production line. So what you're seeing here is something that's going to be tested this summer for our demonstrator. Meanwhile, we are still assembling the result from the mesocosm scale that we finished this year. And so, yeah, basically we'll know more and show the full story for our second webinar by the end of the project. And I leave the floor to Carlos again.
Okay. Well, the objectives of the MySOIL project are in line with the further steps of mycoremediation. This project try to clarify some challenges of the mycoremediation. This technology is guideless for the implementation of this biotechnology. It's necessary to test mycoremediation at full scale and determine clearly the key points of this process. And of course, we have to assure fungal security, fungal inocular suppliers. Another important point is the replicability of the mycopiles in different contaminated sites with different soils, climatic condition, and TPH characteristic and concentration. For example, in my LIFE project, we test 3 different mycopiles in 3 different countries. And finally, MySOIL is focusing total petroleum and hydrocarbons in TP8, but this biotechnology can and must be applied to other contaminants to expand the use of mycoremediation. In this project, we are going to test the remediation of soil polluted with heat thermal fluids used in the solar thermal plants. And these fluids are mainly biphenyls and organic compounds. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos and Caroline. I think we went to the final part of this workshop. I know we are just 20 minutes past the time that we have foreseen, but I think we can dedicate at least 15 to half an hour to answer any questions that you have. I would like to invite the other presenters also to switch on their camera. And I think we can start with the question that it's in the chat that I think it was directly directed to Jaime. I think Jaime cannot switch his camera on, but
yeah, sorry about that. But I will join in voice.
That's
right.
Okay.
So okay. So thanks, Oscar, for your question regarding the degradation of caffeine. So coffee waste have been used previously for the production of Pleurotus striatus, and there are different results that have been reported that basically the caffeine can be degraded by demethylation of the caffeine into other side products, derivative products, but these side products bioaccumulate in the substrates. So if you want to use this substrate as a fertilizer, you have to be careful about how toxic are these derivatives for the crop that you want to grow over there. Besides, when growing the mushrooms, the pleurotus itself, if you want to get fruiting bodies, the basidioms, so the caffeine and the derivatives as well bioaccumulate in the carpophores as well. So it could be an issue as well for the consumption of these mushrooms, and we don't really know if this is because of the metabolism of the caffeine, or either is because there is a translocation from the substrate to the carpophores. So I would say that we will require more research with different crops to answer this question.
Okay, thank you for answering my question. So are there any ways that you can then treat the soil for these derivatives? So for example, is composting a way you can remove those, or is it not really used, this vermite composting, for example? Because I read something in a paper that they use vermite composting to remove those derivatives, or you don't know for sure?
Yeah, certainly you can do so. And I have to say that the raw material, for example, the raw spent mushroom substrate is not a good fertilizer. So you should always try to recompose somehow this spent mushroom compost in order to use this as a fertilizer. And the reason is because there are usually the conductivity in the spent mushroom substrate is high. So this is one of the issues. And then other issues is that still this is a primary decomposer, so still the fibers are too dry, basically, and the nutrients are not readily available. So composting could, partially decompose these derivatives from the caffeine and also mature the substrate and make this more available as a fertilizer. So yeah, I mean, I would say that certainly this is an approach Otherwise, obviously, bioremediation or using other different strains could be also an answer. But as I already noted, there is not much in the literature to answer this question so far.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Thank you, Oscar and Jaime. I don't see any other questions or raise hand up. So, oh yeah, we have one from Stefan. I just write, but if you want, you can switch on your camera and ask yourself. Please go ahead.
Salut Stéphane.
Salut Caro. Okay, I would like to know how we can be part of this research project, because it's already several years that I'm working on this field. And there are very interesting stuff. For example, it's possible to digest cigarette butts in very few weeks. In 3 or 4 weeks, cigarette butts are disappearing like this. And from what I did already here, I did tests substrate to be put into methanogenic producer, so it's increasing the methane production by 200% from what the first result we did. And so I would like to see how we can enter into this research here, because I'm doing it in my garage, and I'm a little bit fed up with this kind of low-level, low-tech things, because I know the potential that is behind it, and it's increasing everything as you demonstrated. It was a very, very interesting project. So how can we make it?
Who wants to answer this question? Caroline, please.
Yes, well, we can reconnect to start with, because it seems we have a lot to share. So that
Okay.
could be a starting point to enter the project. Then I'm not sure I can say much about it, but reconnecting would be surely a first step.
Nice. And I'm also working on an Erasmus project about biomimicry and permaculture. So we need
Sure, great.
to phone soon. Okay, nice.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. Yeah. Let's talk soon.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if Luis is still here, but one of the highlights or the updates that the European Union are doing in the new projects, it's all the part of the dissemination, communication, stakeholder engagement, that it should be like one of the milestones of the currently and the upcoming research projects. Just spread the word, and that the research is not ending with the end of the project, it's going on and on. I don't know if Luis, do you want to add something, or maybe we can go to the next question? Okay, maybe to the next question. Yeah, Luis is not here anymore. I think he needed to quit the meeting. Any other question? Or comments, or just please free. Maybe, okay, yeah, please, Oscar. Do you want to connect your camera and your micro? If not,
yes, sure. I was wondering what, like, now the product is the soil. What happens then with the soil? Is it sold, or is it given to farmers, or is there any use for it right now, or is it just still in this project phase that we're trying to generate the soil, like generate the healthy soil?
That's interesting question. Somebody wants to answer. Maybe, I mean, there are several approaches. Indeed, inside MySOIL, I think we are focusing on one or two. I don't know if Jorge or Lauren, do you want to answer? I can do it, but yeah, Jorge.
Well, at the moment, I think there is a problem with the legislation because the soil is a residue, and to give other uses to the soil, it's very hard. So that's one of the goals of the project too. We discussed it in our last meeting. That we need to have some way to give a good use to the soil after it's being remediated, because nowadays we can't use the soil for many other things. That's the main problem. I don't know if Laurent or Geoffrey want to add something.
Yeah,
but I think this is the main problem.
It's clear that soil is not a material. You can't find soil to sell in a retailer shop, and mainly most of the time the soil belongs to a site, and remediating the soil is a way to remediate the site, to lower the risk for the users of the site. Especially the French law is directed in this direction: risk assessment to lower the risk. Other countries say, okay, you need to go under a threshold, but always the aim is to recover the use of the site and prevent the ills of the users. We clean the soil and keep it on site most of the time. Some of the works in urban areas, for example, need to excavate the soil because you want to make 2 levels of parking under the building. That's the urban legislation, for example. And then you need to use this clean soil, and you may prevent heaps of soil to go in the landfill in cleaning it. So there are always different strategies depending on the cases.
Okay, and then, for example, if the soil, like you have the site and then you use mycoremediation for cleaning the soil, let's say, is there then like a certain testing that the natural inhabitants of the soil return to that site? Is that already been done or not so much?
We may consider this part of the knowledge is growing up. Till today, most of the time when you need to remediate the soil is in real estate project. Somebody want to buy and build something, and so the objective is to harden the soil to build houses or offices. This is the main market for the soil. It's evolving yet, because as new objectives, if I think to European laws or French laws saying that there is no net artificialization, for example, we may enhance the surface to vegetalize also in urban areas, and this is new parameters to test. Today, the main parameters is the level of chemicals in the soil. Tomorrow, if owner of the soil ask us to find other parameters, you have to enhance the biodiversity, you have to enhance the acceptance or the possibility of germination. We will propose different techniques to achieve this. But today, that's not the main market.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think Alessandro wanted to complement this answer, please.
Yes, just to answer, to integrate the answer to Oscar. For instance, the Italian legislation has set a threshold for the recovery and reuse of the soil for commercial and industrial purposes. This limit for hydrocarbons has been set at 750 milligrams per kilogram. And of course, the destination of soil for use will depend on the residual concentration, on the cleanup level, which is achieved by the bioremediation intervention or the remediation intervention. So, but legislation is not homogeneous across countries, as the other colleagues have pointed out. Some countries use a risk assessment approach. The same is also done in Italy, but it's also associated to cleanup levels. And I have given you an example specifically tailored for total petroleum hydrocarbons, which is the subject of the present meeting.
Yes, just that it's one of the objectives that we are working on within the consortium. We hope to publish a white paper and try to give it to the different public administration, also to the European levels. We'll see. We are working on it. But it's interesting because different countries, different regions have different procedures. And I think almost 100% are based also at some level to a risk assessment. They are commenting to me that...
Sorry, Geoffrey.
Yeah, please, Jorge.
You said we were going to publish the white paper, and I remember that in the end of the project, we will publish some guidelines about this.
Yes.
About this.
The guidelines, it's regarding to mycoremediation mainly, and the white paper will be focusing to the TPH pollution and bioremediation approaches. We are working on that. So the white paper, it's mainly legislation. The guidelines will be how to apply or implement mycoremediation, which are the steps to follow. Yes, and they are commenting me that we should close the workshop at 12:30, if it's okay from everyone. So we have time for 2 short questions. I will give floor to Nidal Butalbi, if I'm pronounced correct. If you want to switch on your camera and micro, if not, I can ask the question. Okay, so the question is how long does it take to remediate soil with this process and reduce cost time? This is also an interesting question, how much time and cost time. So anyone wants to answer?
Yeah, maybe we may say that's exactly what I proposed as a introduction. That's points that MySOIL project have to demonstrate. We know that it works. Scientific evidence exists in the different universities around this table today. Now we need to understand how the engineering may involve this existing reaction in a tool for companies, because human people need to use this, even if it happens naturally. But we want that it happens in the proper direction with the proper speed of effectiveness when we need it. We not always have the time to wait for decades that it naturally occurs. Somebody wants to live in a place, and we want that it's remediated.
Yeah, but really the project is about how to frame those information. So how long will it take to treat a certain soil with a certain type of contaminant? Will it fit with the, let's say, the schedule of the site owners in their remediation needs? And also the costs. It's also something that we are addressing. It's the aim here is to provide something that is a biological solution that could be an alternative to harsh and expensive thermal treatment. So of course the cost will be made competitive, but this is all part of the things that we are assessing. We are really framing all those parameters to be able to have like in the guideline to know when to use, under what conditions, when it will work, when it will not work, and things like that. So that really it becomes another tool for the remediation industry.
Yeah, very true, Corinne. There is no tool that works in whatever conditions. You see how soils are complex, and the case, the nature of the pollutants, and the position regarding the neighborhood of the site. We may reasonably hope that we have a duration shorter than classical bioremediation. We want to accelerate. Thus we make a big comparison with the classical bioremediation. This is one of the big tools that we use to make the remediation. We hope to go faster and a bit further ahead, more with lower remaining concentration at the end, lowering the unavailability of certain components stick to the organic soil matrix. That's why Alessandro presented so many the outside effect, the excreted enzymes from the fungus able to go where the bacteria are not able to go in the soil to degrade the pollutant or just to dissolve them to make them more available for bacteria. Sometimes the combination and cooperation between both strains, or maybe more than two, is very important in those cases. We hope that it could go as fast as thermal disruption with less environmental effects. That's one of the main conventions that we have all together. But 6 months concerning for the total extra works in a real estate project is not so long, because between the time you decide to build something and the time you put the first stone, there is some delay, administrative delay and organization, and so it could be completely inserted in the schedule of the works.
Thank you for the answer. I think that's all the questions. If there is no... Yeah, please, Alessandro.
Okay. So, considering the low numbers of the questions, I would like to integrate also the answer to the first question made by Oscar, who asked Jaime to report on the efficacy of Pleurodus species in degrading caffeine. And I would add that there is a research and cooperation center in France, in Montpellier, called Orston. They have long worked on the removal of caffeine from spent coffee grounds. And I have to highlight that the most effective caffeine degrading strains belong to either Penicillium or Aspergillus species. So if the destination is for agriculture, you might change organism.
Okay, this is super interesting. I will certainly look it up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the name of the researcher. Now, these are not quite recent papers. Is Rousseau's. He led the group of Austin working on caffeine. They have long work on that.
Okay, so it's like RUSSELS?
It's ROUSSOS. Rousseau's.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we should close the workshop. I would like to thank again the different presentators, the talkers, the speech, the audience that stayed tuned for 2 hours and a half, and the different questions. And just please, if you want to follow us, we have LinkedIn and Twitter, and also we have our webpage where you can ask or comment or send any email from now on. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that will be it. Goodbye.